This video is brought to you by Patreon provider Able.
Well, hello and welcome. You are checking out the TRIJICON Credo FFP version of the 1:6x24 with, unfortunately, green illumination. TRIJICON screwed up and put a green illuminated dot instead of the red segmented circle in the box, so Able got the wrong one. Unfortunately, these things happen. This being a first focal plane scope, as you can see, as we increase the magnification to its maximum of 6, the reticle will change size. Now, if you've never seen the AccuPower 1:4 or 1:8 reviews that I've done, please go back and watch those first. Link in the description below, primarily because it'll give you a better understanding of how this thing performs versus the older AccuPower and the 1:4 versus the 1:8. Illumination on this is exactly as we saw with the 1:4. It's not really ideal for any sort of situation other than darker environments, which is not exactly what you want out of, in my opinion, an LPVO. However, at least at 1x with a segmented circle, it's large enough that your eye will pick up on it easily enough, and it's not so obtrusive that it's going to block anything you might be shooting at. With that, let's see how these turrets sound. These turrets are great. They're among some of the best that you can get for an LPVO that are simple, easy to use, and work well.
TRIJICON Credo 1:6. Illumination at full is no different from the green AccuPower 1:4 that I had in the past. It is very, very low, basically useless. Not very happy to hear that. Well, I'm actually less happy to say that. That's it at full. And this is a fairly dark environment. You think this thing should be a little bit brighter than that, but it's not. Whatever. Anyway, this thing being a mil scope, it's a little hard to see. That's as good as we're going to have it. I am delighted, however, to say that the reticle lines up extremely well with the target, so that is very, very nice to see. We're going to try to do a little mini box test and go from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 4 mils, 4 mils. It's really hard to pick up on the camera, but it looks like we're about 0.1 of a mil low, close to 0.2, and windage looks to line up fairly well. Again, though, despite all of this, this is a system that you're going to set and forget. All right, let's just crank up the elevation. 7, 8, 9, and 10 mils indicated on the dials, which are fantastic. And we are off by, let's count, 1, 2 clicks. So 2% on 10 mils isn't the end of the world, especially on a stylus scope like this, but it seems to be consistent and repeatable. So if you figure out your dope, you shouldn't have to worry about this thing making bad hits.
All in all, not too bad. I think 2% is great for a scope like this, considering that you're going to set it and forget it. If this is a much more precision-oriented optic where you're going to constantly be dialing it, 2% is a lot, and usually at the far extreme of where manufacturers are willing to accept. Now, again, this thing falls right in between of the 1:4 and the 1:8. You could see the power lines right above it towards the top of the image is showing some deformation. There is some fisheyeing and some light magnification to this. Unfortunately, it's always noticeable, along with a soft edge, which I'll showcase throughout this entire video. But I like how little of the scope body you can see, and again, there's your maximum illumination. And yeah, bring it up to 6x so you could see the full-size reticle, which I have a love-hate relationship with. The second focal plane 1 to 4, I think the segmented circle is a little bit too fine of a center to be using for general use. The ring is nice, it does help you pull towards the center, but in my usage with lack of really bright illumination, it's a little bit harder for your eye to pick up the dead center of it. At 30 yards on our power transformer, we usually can't expect an LPVO at this sort of distance to look really good, but I think the image actually looks more than acceptable, and is honestly really good. But as you're about to see, once we focus our attention on our 400-yard brick building, things are going to change a little bit. The 1X still looks pretty good, but you can see a little bit of blurring in the absolute extreme edges of it. But once we take it up past 4X or so, the only real noticeably sharp area is inside that segmented circle. That tree line to the left is around 100 to 150 yards, and that building is around 400. The center is great. It looks awesome, but outside that segmented circle, you have to worry about losing some sort of image quality, which is a little surprising because the 1 to 4 was about on par with how this thing is at 4X, and the 1 to 8 I found was even better than this thing was. Granted, that has a 34mm tube, a larger front objective, and I'm sure had slightly different glass to it, but I was expecting this to be a little bit better than that, especially how good it looks at 1X. However, unlike the 1 to 8 at maximum magnification, the center crosshair on this still remains fairly fine, but that's a double-edged sword because of how fine it is, it's harder to see at lower magnifications, whereas the 1 to 8 I feel is a little bit easier to pick up, which I'm going to showcase you a little bit of how the 1 to 8 looked at these exact distances. But I don't know, it's just a little frustrating. Power lines right there in front of your face are about 30 yards maximum magnification. They look great, but anything beyond that just doesn't have the clarity that I was expecting for this thing. I know it's kind of difficult to get an LPVO just right, but with this, it's disappointing, especially for the price. $900+ for a first focal plane 1 to 6 is extreme. Now, before anyone comments saying, "Oh, well, shh," listen. When I filmed the 1 to 8, it was like 0 degrees outside, and with the window fully open, it was giving me really bad mirage, so bad that the image actually looked worse. I am filming this, yes, through a window, but still look at how much better the image looks from center to edge. And notice that center crosshair is a little bit thicker, and then notice how much better the red illumination is. So much better than the green. But going back to that exact image that I was talking about earlier, look at how much better that image looks. Yes, the 30-yard power lines are out of focus compared to the power tower all the way at about 800, but what's more important for you to be shooting at a higher magnification, 30 yards or 800-ish? So there you go. Quick little comparison between this 1 to 6 first focal plane and the 1 to 8. Continuing right along, we go to my home away from home, the 50-yard line at my local range. This was a very cloudy, intermittent day, and thus I had a really hard time getting the camera settings just right to where it either wasn't completely washing out and or it wasn't completely dark that you couldn't see anything. Illumination there on full, despite being overcast, is barely even noticeable. The wind flags are there from shooter Stu, who is an F-class champion when it comes to rimfire shooting. That's why I did not win. Anyway, you will note at the very extreme edges, the image doesn't appear as sharp as it really should. It's noticeable in different environments and at different distances. Again, just like we saw earlier with the power transformer, 6X at 50 yards were greeted with a very nice image with very little to no chromatic aberration, which is nice. I quickly juggled the camera settings to try to get it within a normal realm, and you get a beautiful image. But again, how often are you really using an LPVO only inside 50 yards? So we'll be taking this to the larger range very soon. But until that time, let's take a look at the eyebox. Starting off at 1X, you will note that you have a pretty forgiving eyebox. But take note of the off-center distortion that you get. That's always present, especially at 1X. It goes way above 1.5, but that fisheye slight magnification is always there, and it is annoying. At 4X, you get a little bit tighter than I would have liked eyebox. And I wonder if that's partly due to the fact that this is a first focal plane scope as opposed to a second focal plane scope. I am delighted to say that I just got a Credo HX in from a new Patreon provider, so I'm going to be able to compare this side by side, basically, and it's going to be fantastic. But here at 6X, it's awfully tight. It shouldn't seem this tight. Now, granted, if you are using this at 6X, you're going to be much more focused and slower behind the gun, so it shouldn't really matter that much, but it's still something to take note of.
Probably 4 foot.
Moving up to the big boy range, as some would say, we focus our attention on 100-yard paper targets. Going from 1 to 6X, still take note of how nice and thin that profile of the scope is. It's not the thinnest, but it's certainly not the thickest. Zooming in a little bit more, it's a little bit bright, but this is a fairly bright image, all things considered. There are some quirks about this glass that I don't particularly care for, but light transmission is not one of them. Chromatic aberration is, again, ever not present, which is fantastic to say. This scope really has some really good features about it, but it's just
At 200?
it's so perfectly in between the 1 to 4
Which one are you going to shoot at?
to 1 to 8, and I'll touch on that more as we wrap this video up. I focus our attention on this 200-yard steel target while my friend N tries to shoot it with his 22 LR in fairly windy conditions. As you can see, spotting with this thing on substantial sized targets like that are easy enough at 200 or so yards. From here, we're just going to look at the 300-yard line. There's not much to see. That paper is at 300. The rack on top is at 320. Unfortunately, because they don't really maintain it up there, that steel has basically been shot to nothing. And that's basically it. Image on the center, again, is still really good. You could pick up a lot of good detail, a lot of sharpness, and some decent contrast. The resolution is good in the center, but the edge is, again, a weak point. From here, we're going to go into the garage and do some garage clearing, and then, if you've made it this long, I have a special treat for anyone that was into Half-Life.
Pew!
This is the kind of environment where the illumination and the segmented circle work really well. The illumination is bright enough that it'll even be able to pick up on a pretty white background with a flashlight. Again, this is about 400 lumens. The big part of the segmented circle is great for picking up easily and quickly, and that center dot is great for small, precise shots.
Pew!
It's excellent. Unfortunately, the illumination's only good in environments like this. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I really hope you watch both the 1 to 4 video and the 1 to 8, because they're honestly two different ends of the spectrum when it comes to LPVOs and what to expect from different types. The 1 to 4 was not particularly great in any sort of way, and the 1 to 8 I felt was excellent in every way.
Pew pew!
Unfortunately, this leans in most cases closer to the 1 to 4 than it does the 1 to 8. The only thing that this has in common with the 1 to 8 is the fact that it's a first focal plane reticle, and that's not good enough. If this had the red illumination, yes, it would bring it up a little bit more on the specifications. It would make it better.
Pew!
But I think it would still be lacking too much in the overall quality of the glass at 1 to 6X and the price. This thing is over $900,
Pew pew!
and that's just a lot of money. Anyway, enjoy this beautiful homage.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maximum brightness.
All right, let's go for it. I smell an ambush. Ah! No! Please!
Who are you?
Will you be quiet?
Why are you leaving me here?
Aim for the head if you can find it.
Get back! No!
Please! Die, you bloodsucker! Got one! Huh, that'll look nice in my trophy room.
Psst. Over here. Do you know who ate all the donuts? No, don't go that way. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
So there you have it. This 1 to 6 Credo falls more towards the 1 to 4 AccuPower as opposed to the 1 to 8. The 1 to 8 is still the best 1 to 8 LPView I've ever got my hands on. The 1 to 4 was okay, but I felt there were better options out there. And with this is a very niche optic, especially with its first focal plane setup like this. The HX models that are second focal plane have a much brighter center dot, or at least so they say. I'm supposed to be getting my hands on one of those soon, so I'll be very curious to see how they actually work. But with this, you're going to buy this specifically for the first focal plane segmented circle setup that this thing has. Granted, the green on this is very disappointing, but like I accidentally made the mistake of already, as you can clearly see, the box says, it says red, and it shows red, but it's green. So shame on you, TRIJICON, for sending this out the door wrong. Now, another reason why you might opt for something like this is the weight. Because though it's a 1 to 6, it comes in at just about 18.4 ounces, which is fairly lightweight. If you were to get a PST Gen 2 1 to 6, you're talking about 22 or so ounces. So a fair amount of weight savings. And with that, a huge thank you to Patreon provider Able for sending this in for review. He's actually not going to be keeping this because, number one, he wanted it in red, not green. Shame on TRIJICON for mixing this up. But also because he was expecting a little bit more out of it. And you know what? Honestly, so was I. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. And as always, see you again next time. And a very huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to help support the channel but don't want to join my Patreon, I completely understand. But you can still help support by using my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks again for watching.